My name is Elena Morales. I'm 33, and just last month, my entire life took a turn I never saw coming. I was cleaning out the little storage unit behind my apartment, the one that always smells like dust and motor oil, when I stumbled across an old cardboard box with my uncle's handwriting on it. Inside was a scratched USB drive. I almost tossed it in the junk pile, but something made me plug it into my laptop. Within seconds, a string of numbers popped up on the screen, and my heart just stopped. That tiny stick of plastic held access to a fortune my late Uncle Miguel had left behind, buried in a forgotten crypto wallet. We're not talking hundreds, not thousands, we're talking millions. I remember staring at the screen, my hands trembling so badly I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered across the floor, but I couldn't move. The world outside went quiet. The traffic, the neighbor's barking dog, everything. All I could hear was the pounding in my chest. And right there, in that suffocating silence, I made a choice. I wasn't going to tell a soul. Not my mom, not my stepdad, not my half-brother who always seems to forget the money he owes me. Nobody. If you're listening to this right now, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. And before I dive into what happened next, hit like and subscribe, because the twists that followed, they changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and what it really means to be safe in your own skin. Because before that dusty afternoon in Phoenix, my life wasn't just ordinary. It was exhausting. I was a night shift ER nurse, barely holding things together, bills stacking up, student loans that never seemed to shrink, and a family who, instead of lifting me up, treated me like a never-ending lifeline they were entitled to. But that box, that USB drive, it became the crack in the wall. The moment fate knocked on my door, and nothing was ever going to be the same again. By the time the glow of that discovery faded, reality came crashing back in the ugliest way. See, I still had my regular night shift at the hospital, and that week, everything that could go wrong did. It was around 2 a.m., right in the middle of a brutal shift. Trauma patients piling in, machines beeping, the smell of antiseptic hanging heavy in the air, when my phone buzzed. Normally, I keep it tucked away, but the caller ID lit up with my stepdad's name, Kurt. He never calls unless it's about money. Against my better judgment, I picked up. His face filled my screen on FaceTime, jaw tight, eyes already angry. "Elena, your mom and I are planning the anniversary dinner," he barked. "We need everyone to pitch in equally. Where's your share?" I blinked, sweat sticking to my scrubs. "Kurt, I'm at work. Can we talk about this later?" "No," he snapped. "We all carry weight in this family. Don't think just because you're a nurse working nights that you get a pass. You're 33, Elena. Grow up." And then the kicker, the part that cut deeper than his words, was my mom. She was right there in the background, visible over his shoulder, fiddling with a wine glass. She didn't say a single thing, not one word in my defense, just looked away. I hung up and shoved my phone back into my pocket, but the sting stayed. That call was like a slap across the face. I had just found out I was sitting on millions. Yet here I was, being scolded like a child over a dinner bill. A couple of days later, the hurt only got heavier. My half-brother Dylan, the one who always seemed to have his hand out, posted a flashy Instagram story. Bright casino lights behind him, poker chips stacked high, a drink in hand. The caption? Lucky night, baby. I stared at it, my thumb frozen on the screen. 3 weeks ago, he had called me crying about overdue rent, and like always, I had Venmo'd him what I could spare. I texted him right then, "Hey, about that money you owe me, any chance you can start paying it back?" The message showed seen, then nothing. No reply, just silence. That silence was louder than any words he could have sent. The worst came the following Sunday. Family dinner at my mom's house. I almost didn't go, but guilt dragged me there. The table was set fancy, linen napkins, candles flickering. Kayla, my cousin, leaned across the table with that sly little smile of hers. She's the kind of person who always dresses 2 levels fancier than the occasion, like she's auditioning for a reality show. "You know, Elena," she said sweetly, "you're so good at taking care of strangers at that hospital. Maybe it's time you show that same generosity to family." Her opportunity? A buy-in for some new business venture she swore was foolproof. Basically a multi-level scheme in a shiny package. She wanted me to cough up $6,000. I let out this awkward laugh, trying to brush it off, but Kurt chimed in again, his fork clattering against his plate. "Honestly, Elena, if you can't step up for family, maybe you shouldn't come around until you figure out where your priorities are." The room went quiet. Every pair of eyes fell on me, and once again my mom said nothing, just pressed her lips together and reached for the bread basket, like pretending the conversation wasn't happening would erase the humiliation burning into my skin. I swallowed hard, forcing a nod. Sure, okay. But inside, I was screaming. Here's the part nobody knew. Not Kurt, not Dylan, not Kayla, not even my mom. Just days before, I had opened that old USB drive and stared at a crypto balance that could wipe out every bill I had ever worried about. $12 million, give or take, depending on the market. But I kept my lips sealed, because deep down I already knew the truth. If they smelled even a hint of that fortune, I wouldn't just lose my privacy, I'd lose myself. They would devour me whole. So I sat at that table, nodding like a dutiful daughter, while my chest burned with a mix of shame and rage. They thought they were scolding me into obedience. They thought they held power. But I had a secret they could never imagine. And that secret was the only thing keeping me from shattering right there in front of them. When dinner ended, I slipped out quickly, avoiding hugs and fake smiles. By the time I got to my car, my hands were shaking. I shut the door, rested my forehead against the steering wheel, and finally let the tears fall. Mascara streaked down my cheeks, dripping onto my scrub top. All the years of carrying them, the loans never repaid, the lectures, the subtle digs about being just a nurse, the expectation that my life should orbit around their needs. In that dark, cramped car, it hit me like a freight train. No amount of loyalty or sacrifice would ever be enough for them. And as much as it broke my heart, I realized I was going to have to start protecting myself. Because what's worse than being broke is being invisible to the very people who should see you the most. That night in my car, with mascara dried on my cheeks and the steering wheel digging into my forehead, something inside me clicked. I'd spent 33 years being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who showed up when everyone else disappeared. And what had it earned me? A half-brother who ghosted me, a cousin who treated me like an ATM, a stepdad who used me as a punching bag for his pride, a mother who chose silence over support. For once in my life, I wasn't broke. For once, I had something they didn't know about. And maybe that was the only way I could finally see them clearly. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to stage some dramatic confrontation at the dinner table. No, I was going to be smart, strategic. If money is the mirror of the soul, then I was about to hold up the biggest mirror they'd ever seen. The first step was finding someone who knew how to handle secrets that big. I booked an appointment downtown with Mrs. Park, a financial attorney whose office overlooked the dusty sprawl of Phoenix. The morning I walked into her high-rise suite, I felt like an imposter. My scrubs still smelled faintly of bleach. My sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, and I clutched my purse so tightly my knuckles went white. She greeted me with a smile that was professional but kind. "Elena, what can I do for you?" My voice trembled as I pulled out the slip of paper where I'd written down the wallet key. "I need to know if it's real, and if it is, how to keep it quiet." Mrs. Park adjusted her glasses, tapped a few keys on her laptop, and her brows lifted ever so slightly. Then she leaned back, folding her hands together. "Congratulations, Ms. Morales. What you have here is life-changing." The room tilted for a moment. Even though I already knew, hearing her say it out loud was like standing at the edge of a canyon, looking down into the vast unknown. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out a plan. She talked about LLCs, blind trusts, shell names that would keep my identity hidden, words I barely understood but clung to like lifelines. She warned me about sudden lifestyle changes, about how the worst mistake winners make is flashing wealth before they're ready. By the time I walked out with a folder stamped Del Sol Trust, I felt different. Not rich, not invincible, just armed. For the first time, I had armor, but armor doesn't erase loneliness. That came later that night when I found myself in the break room of the hospital, staring at a vending machine that had eaten my last dollar. I laughed bitterly, thinking how absurd it was that I had millions locked away, yet couldn't even get a bag of chips. That's when Rosa Delgado shuffled in, 65, a janitor with kind eyes and a limp from decades of hard work. She carried a little Tupperware wrapped in foil. "You didn't eat, did you?" she said, shaking her head before I could answer. She set the Tupperware in my lap. Inside was a warm burrito, still steaming. "I made too much for my granddaughter. Eat. You're too skinny for night shift." I bit back tears as I thanked her. Rosa wasn't related by blood, but she had given me more in that moment than my entire family had in years, without asking for anything in return. That was the spark. If I wanted to know who really cared about me, who could show up without the promise of a payout, I needed to create a test. Now here's where my path split from the obvious. I wasn't going to lie and say I lost my job. That felt manipulative, and honestly, my conscience couldn't carry that weight. Instead, I came up with something more honest, but just as revealing. I would tell them the truth, at least a truth, that between car repairs and helping cover meds for a homeless patient I'd taken under my wing, I was strapped for cash that month, and I needed to borrow $2,500, just for 30 days. Enough to sting, not enough to ruin anyone in my family. It wasn't a handout I'd ask for. It was a short-term loan, a test of whether love came before convenience. I drafted the same message and sent it, one by one, to my mom and Kurt, to Dylan, to Kayla, and to my Aunt Berta, who loved to brag about her boutique in Scottsdale. Every text made my pulse spike. My thumb hovered over send like I was detonating explosives. But each time I pressed it anyway. And then I waited. The responses trickled in exactly as I feared. My mom replied, "Let me ask Kurt." Then radio silence. Kurt sent a voice memo dripping with disdain. "You're a grown woman, Elena. Stop throwing money at other people's problems and learn to handle your own. Don't come running to us for bailouts." Dylan texted back, "Oof, bad timing. I'll get you next week." Hours later, he posted a photo of brand new speakers in his living room. Kayla wrote, "Girl, if you've got $2,500, the smart move is to invest with me. Double it in 2 months. DM me." And Aunt Berta? She left me on red. No explanation, no excuse, just a gray check mark staring back. By the third day, my chest was heavy with disappointment. I told myself I shouldn't be surprised. Hadn't they always shown me who they were? Still, it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I dragged myself into the hospital that night, my stomach hollow. Rosa found me in the supply closet reorganizing bandages just to keep busy. "You look like someone stole your sunshine," she teased. I forced a smile, but the truth leaked out in a whisper. I asked my family for help. No one came through. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her faded purse, pulled out a crinkled envelope, and pressed it into my hand. Inside was $800 in worn bills. "It's not the whole thing," she said softly, "but it's what I've been saving for my granddaughter's quinceañera dress. Take it. Pay me back when you can." I froze. "Rosa, I can't. This is for your family." She squeezed my hand. "You are family, Mija. Don't you forget that." Tears burned my eyes as I clutched that envelope. $800 meant more to me than all 12 million sitting in that crypto wallet, because it came with love, with sacrifice, with no strings attached. And in that moment, I knew the real test had just begun. The first round of answers from my family left me hollow, but I told myself maybe, just maybe, someone would surprise me if I gave it a little more time. Deep down, though, I knew better. 3 nights later, I came off a brutal 12-hour shift. My feet ached, my eyes felt like sandpaper, and my scrubs were stiff with dried sweat. I checked my phone in the parking garage, hoping for even one message saying, "Don't worry, I got you." Instead, there it was. A new notification from Kurt. It wasn't money. It wasn't an offer to help. It was a voice memo. I sat in my car and hit play. His tone was sharp, every word laced with contempt. "Elena, you're 33 years old. If you don't have a cushion for these so-called emergencies, that's on you. You can't keep pouring your paycheck into strays and sob stories, then come crying to us. Grow up, take responsibility, and stop embarrassing this family." I let the phone drop into my lap, the harsh sound of his voice still echoing in my head. Embarrassment. That's what he thought of me. Not hardworking, not loyal, just an embarrassment. The hits kept coming. The next day, Dylan finally texted again. "Sis, I swear I'll help soon. Just can't right now." Not an hour later, his Instagram story lit up my feed. Him unboxing a brand new set of surround sound speakers, grinning ear to ear like a kid on Christmas. I laughed out loud in my kitchen, but it wasn't humor. It was that bitter kind of laugh you choke on when anger and grief collide. Kayla, on the other hand, doubled down. She sent me a glossy PDF file full of stock images and fake testimonials. Her caption, $2,500 could turn into $10K. Don't miss out, cousin. Family should invest together. I wanted to scream. It was like none of them heard me. None of them cared that I was asking for help, not a sales pitch. And as if family betrayal wasn't enough, work decided to pile on too. At the hospital, my charge nurse, the same one who'd been taking credit for my ideas for months, did it again. There'd been a chaotic trauma case, and I was the one who caught a subtle drop in a patient's vitals. I shouted, pushed for an intervention, and we saved his life. Later, in the debrief, she smiled sweetly and said, "I'm so glad I noticed that heart rate change when I did." I stared at her, blood rushing in my ears. She was erasing me in real time, taking my work, my instincts, my moment. When I spoke up, she tilted her head and said, "Elena, you seem tired. Maybe you should take fewer shifts until you're more focused." And just like that, my hours were slashed for the next schedule, a punishment for speaking the truth. It felt like the world was conspiring to tell me, "You don't matter. Not at work, not at home, not anywhere." That night, I ended up in Rosa's tiny kitchen. She had invited me over after noticing I'd been dragging my feet down the hallway like a ghost. Her place smelled like cumin and warm tortillas. The walls were lined with faded photos, her late husband in his mechanic's overalls, her granddaughter in a soccer uniform, Rosa herself younger and laughing, flour on her cheek. We sat at the chipped linoleum table while she reheated beans on the stove. She didn't ask why my eyes were swollen. She didn't press. She just handed me a glass of water and waited. Finally, the words tumbled out of me about Kurt's memo, Dylan's lies, Kayla's pitch, even the humiliation at work. Rosa listened, nodding slowly, her hands folded in her lap. When I finished, she reached for her old purse, the leather worn soft at the edges. She pulled out a plain brown envelope and slid it across the table. "Take it," she said. I frowned, confused. Inside was a stack of bills, crumpled, some of them faded but real, $800. "Rosa, no," I whispered. "This is for your family, for your granddaughter's quinceañera. You can't—" She shook her head firmly. "Mija, listen to me. Money comes and goes. But when someone you love is sinking, you don't just stand there and watch. It's not enough, but it's what I have. You'll pay me back when life gives you air again." I stared at that envelope, my throat tightening. $800 wasn't just money. It was Rosa's everything. Hours of scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, walking on bad knees. I covered my face with my hands and cried, the kind of raw, heaving sobs that leave you empty, because this woman, who had so little, was offering me more than my own blood ever would. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a test of my family anymore. It was a test of me. Who did I want to be? Bitter, angry, consumed by their rejection? Or someone who could turn this secret fortune into something bigger than myself? Rosa's $800 became my anchor, proof that love wasn't measured in zeros, but in sacrifice. Proof that family wasn't just DNA, it was who showed up when no one else did. And deep in my chest, a new resolve took root. I wasn't done. This was just the beginning. Because if the people who shared my last name could turn their backs when I needed $2,500, then I was going to show them what it felt like when I held the kind of power they couldn't even imagine. And when the time came, they'd finally see the truth. I kept Rosa's envelope in my nightstand for weeks. I didn't spend a single dollar from it. Just seeing those crumpled bills every night before I slept reminded me love can be heavy even when it comes wrapped in paper. And it made me certain my family would never define my worth again. So I went back to Mrs. Park, my attorney, and said 5 words that changed the course of everything. I want to build something. She raised an eyebrow. Something charitable? I nodded. Anonymous, quiet, but real. Over the next few months, we worked in secret. Piece by piece, I converted that hidden crypto into clean, traceable funds, funneling it into Del Sol Trust. From there, we launched a project I called Night Shift Hearts, a mobile clinic designed to bring medical care to people who had nothing, not even an address. The first time I saw that white van roll out painted with a simple moon and star logo, I felt more powerful than if I'd bought 10 mansions. Because it wasn't about proving anything. It was about rewriting the story I'd been trapped in my whole life. But fate wasn't done with me. Mom's birthday came up, a big one, the kind that demanded balloons and champagne and every cousin crammed into her living room. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay home, I went. The place was buzzing when I walked in. Kurt was front and center, puffing his chest, bragging about a land deal he was closing. Kayla was waving glossy contracts around like confetti. Dylan, already on his second beer, telling anyone who'd listen about a new business idea that definitely wouldn't happen. I found myself standing in the corner, invisible as always, clutching a store-bought bouquet while nobody noticed. Then I saw it. The old cardboard box I'd brought along, the one from Uncle Miguel's storage. I'd kept it hidden in my trunk all this time, and tonight, it was going on the table. When dinner quieted down, I cleared my throat. My hands trembled as I placed the box next to the birthday cake. "Before Mom blows out her candles," I said, forcing my voice steady, "I want to share something Miguel once told me. He said, 'Money is just a mirror. It shows people who they really are.'" The room shifted uncomfortably. Kayla rolled her eyes. Kurt smirked like he was waiting for me to embarrass myself again. But I wasn't done. I reached into the box and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were printed photos. Smiling kids at the shelter, volunteers setting up cots, patients climbing into the back of the Night Shift Hearts van. I laid them across the table one by one, the glossy paper catching the candlelight. "This," I said, "is what family means to me. Strangers who had nothing and still managed to give me back more than I ever expected. Strangers who didn't turn away when I asked for help." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Elena, what is this?" I smiled tightly. "It's a program called Night Shift Hearts, funded by the Del Sol Trust. We've provided over 300 free treatments in the last 2 months, and starting tonight, the entire neighborhood, your neighborhood, gets a year of free mobile health care, every single resident." Gasps rippled through the room. Kayla's jaw dropped. Dylan set down his beer. Even Kurt's smug grin faltered. "And one more thing," I added, pulling out a framed certificate. "This year, the Del Sol Trust is launching the Rosa Delgado Nursing Scholarship, because when I needed help, Rosa, who had so little, gave me everything she had." At that, my voice cracked. I turned toward Rosa, who had come with me but was sitting quietly in the back, clutching her purse. Tears glistened in her eyes as she shook her head, overwhelmed. The room went still. The weight of my words hung in the air. Then, of course, Kurt broke the silence. Hold on. He leaned forward, pointing a finger at me. So you're behind this trust? You're the one throwing money around to strangers while your own family is scraping by? I locked eyes with him, my voice steady. Strangers showed me more kindness than my family ever did. He slammed his fist on the table. Family comes first, Elena. I stood taller, the tremor gone from my hands. No, real family is the people who make you feel safe, not the ones who use you like a wallet with legs. The words cut through the air like glass shattering. For the first time in my life, I watched Kurt's face go red, his confidence cracking. Kayla fumbled with her glossy papers, suddenly looking smaller. Dylan stared down at his hands. Mom just sat there, pale, her lips pressed tight. And me? For once, I wasn't the invisible one in the corner. I was the storm. The next morning, local news picked up the story. Anonymous donor funds mobile clinic for Phoenix homeless. Photos of the van, kids waving to the camera, Rosa smiling shyly beside the plaque with her name on it. And though the article never mentioned me, everyone in that birthday room knew exactly where it came from. Calls started flooding in. Kayla suddenly wanted to collaborate on business ventures. Dylan left me voicemails dripping with guilt. Even Aunt Berta, who hadn't returned my texts in months, suddenly reached out with syrupy sweet words about how proud the family was. But I didn't answer, because their chance had already come and gone. That week I drove the van myself one evening just to see it in action. The desert sun was sinking, painting the sky orange and purple, when we parked outside a run-down shelter. People lined up quietly, some with bandaged arms, others with tired eyes. One woman whispered, "You're an angel." Another clutched my hand and said, "Thank you for showing up." And in that moment, I realized something. The power wasn't in the millions, or the secret trust, or even the act of defying my family. The power was in choosing where my love went. And for the first time in 33 years, I was finally choosing myself. After that birthday dinner, nothing in my family looked the same again. The news article about night shift hearts spread faster than wildfire on Facebook. Old classmates I hadn't heard from in years messaged me with congratulations, even though they didn't know I was behind it. But my family? Their reactions were far more complicated. Kayla was the first to crack. One evening, I got a frantic voicemail from her. Her voice was trembling, desperate. "Elena, please call me back. The business, it's falling apart. People are saying it's a scam, and now some of them are threatening to sue me. I just need help covering the legal fees. You don't understand, they'll ruin me." I sat on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the dark TV screen. Kayla had smiled in my face while trying to rope me into her pyramid. She had ignored me when I asked for a loan, and now, suddenly, I was her lifeline? For the first time, I didn't feel guilty saying no. I did, however, send an anonymous donation to a victim's legal fund because they were the ones truly wronged. But Kayla, she would have to face the consequences of her choices. Then came Dylan. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, thinner than I'd ever seen him. His hands shook, his skin pale. When I opened the door, he looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "I need help. Please, I can't keep doing this." Behind the tears, I could see the wreckage. Gambling debts, unpaid loans, nights spent running from one high to the next. I took a deep breath. "Dylan, I won't hand you cash, not anymore. But if you're serious about getting better, I'll cover rehab. On one condition, You sign yourself in and you stay." For once, he didn't argue. He just nodded, voice cracking. "Okay." The next morning, I stood beside him as he filled out the intake forms. Watching him scrawl his name with shaky hands, I realized I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was giving him one last chance to protect his own life, and then my mother. A week after the birthday dinner, she showed up at one of the mobile clinic sites. I was stocking supplies in the back of the van when I heard her voice call my name. She stood there in the fading sunlight, clutching her purse like a shield. "I wanted to see it for myself," she murmured, eyes scanning the line of patients waiting for care. Elderly men in threadbare jackets, mothers holding toddlers, a man with a walker, leaning heavy on each step. I watched her expression shift. The pride in her eyes when Kurt bragged about land deals, the silence at the dinner table, that all melted into something raw. Regret. Her voice broke when she finally said, "I didn't defend you. All those years, I let him talk down to you. I told myself staying quiet kept the peace. But I see now. It broke you instead." Tears blurred my vision. "Mom, you don't get it. I begged for scraps from people who should have stood up for me. Rosa had less than all of you, and she still gave me everything she had." My mother stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. "I can't undo the past, but I want to try. Let me help now, even if it's just standing beside you." I hesitated, anger and love warring inside me. But in that moment, surrounded by strangers who called me Angel, I realized forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about freeing myself from carrying the weight forever. So I let her hold my hand, not because the slate was clean, but because healing had to start somewhere. As for Kurt, he never showed up at the clinic, never called, never apologized. Rumor had it his land deal went sour, but I didn't care enough to find out. For the first time in my life, I didn't owe him an explanation, a defense, or even my presence. And that silence, that deliberate choice to cut him out, was the sweetest revenge I could imagine. By the end of that month, the family I thought I knew had crumbled. Kayla faced lawsuits, Dylan was finally in rehab, and my mother was beginning to rebuild what she had let fall apart for so long. And me? I felt lighter. Not because everyone got what they deserved, but because I had finally learned where to draw the line. One evening, Rosa and I sat outside her small apartment, watching her granddaughter chase fireflies in the yard. Rosa turned to me, her eyes twinkling. "You see, mija? The truth always comes out. Sometimes it just takes longer than we want." I smiled, my heart swelling with gratitude. She had given me $800 when no one else would, and now I was in a position to give her and myself so much more. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the story of who gets to matter, and for the first time, the ending was finally mine to write. A full year passed after that birthday night, and let me tell you, 12 months can turn a life upside down in ways you never expect. I still worked some night shifts at the hospital, just a couple each week. Not because I needed the paycheck, but because the hum of the ER reminded me who I was before the money, before the trust, before everything spun into chaos. Walking those halls in scrubs, I could still feel grounded, still human. But outside those fluorescent lights, my world had transformed. The Night Shift Hearts program grew faster than anyone imagined. What started as a single van now had 3, rolling across Phoenix neighborhoods every day. We'd treated veterans, runaway teens, grandmothers raising kids alone. We weren't flashy, but we showed up. And showing up turned out to be more powerful than any grand gesture I could have made to my blood relatives. Rosa officially retired from her janitorial job that spring. On her last day, I surprised her with a key. She blinked, confused, holding the tiny brass in her weathered hands. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's your casita," I said, my voice cracking. "A little house, paid for by the trust, close enough to us, close enough to your granddaughter. You'll never have to worry about rent again." She shook her head, tears spilling freely. No, I can't accept this." "You're not accepting charity," I told her. "You're accepting gratitude. And if it makes you feel better, you can pay me $1 a month. We'll call it rent." She laughed through her tears, clutching me like I was her own daughter. In many ways, I guess I was. Dylan, to my surprise, stuck with rehab. 6 months sober, he started working as a line cook at a diner off Van Buren. When I visited, he flipped a greasy burger onto a plate and grinned sheepishly. "Not glamorous," he admitted, "but it's honest." For the first time, I believed him. Kayla, on the other hand, had to face the music. Her multi-level empire collapsed. Lawsuits dragged her reputation through the mud. One afternoon she called me, her voice hollow. "Elena, I'm sorry, I was stupid. I hurt people. I hurt you. I can't take it back." I didn't say the words she wanted. I didn't say I forgive you, but I did tell her this. Make it right. That's the only apology that matters. And slowly, I heard she started volunteering with one of our clinics. Maybe guilt brought her there, but sometimes guilt is the first brick in rebuilding a better life. My mother, well, she began showing up at the clinics too. At first, she just watched from the sidelines, like a stranger peering in. But one day, she rolled up her sleeves and started helping at the check-in table, scribbling names, handing out water bottles, even holding babies so exhausted moms could rest. One evening, as we packed up after a long day, she turned to me. The sunset painted her face in gold and shadows. "I used to think family was about loyalty no matter what," she admitted softly. "But now I see it's about choosing each other, again and again, even when it's hard." It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't a magic fix for years of silence. But it was something. And sometimes, something is enough to begin. And me. I live in a modest little house on the edge of the city, with a garden where the desert roses bloom bright against the dust. Every morning I water them as the sun rises, sipping coffee in the quiet. And some evenings, Rosa and I sit on her porch, her granddaughter buzzing around us, the air warm with laughter. I don't live in luxury. I don't drive a sports car or flaunt designer clothes, but I have peace, and that peace feels richer than any fortune ever could. Because here's what I learned. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. It showed me that my stepdad would always measure worth in dollars, that Kayla would choose schemes over sincerity, that Dylan would drown himself until he was forced to grab a lifeline, that my mom would hide in silence until silence hurt too much. But it also revealed Rosa, her envelope of $800, her burritos on my night shifts, her hand reaching across a chipped kitchen table saying, "You are family, mija." That was the mirror I needed. So if you've listened this far, I want to leave you with this. Family isn't defined by last names, bloodlines, or shared DNA. Family is who shows up when you're at your lowest, who digs into their pocket, even when it's almost empty, who sees you, not as an embarrassment, not as a burden, but as someone worth fighting for. If you've ever had to learn that lesson the hard way, you know the sting, but you also know the freedom that comes after. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't payback at all. It's peace.